Hi guys, the title of the title you see on the screen today. Don't forget to like and subscribe and we'll get started. This story is about a girl who just wanted some light so she could see the laundry and hang it up. Every time she did laundry, she could not see it all well, even the clothes, and could not perform her duties properly. With a light like the flickering lanterns on a shopping street or magical fireworks at a fair, Vanessa moved as if she were dancing, imagining the shabby front yard getting brighter. And as the warm light spread and illuminated the front yard, Vanessa thought it was just some fireflies and called it a huge stroke of luck. But it wasn't until a benefactor came into her life that she realized she was completely wrong. At the time, Vanessa Rose was 18 years old. She came to the kids walking in the backyard and turned to her older brother. The boy, however, when he saw her in her school uniform, was very surprised and asked, "Is Big Sister really going to join Wanberg Academy?" Vanessa smiled back at him and told him that was right, so he should behave himself and be sure not to fight with anyone. She stroked him on the head and told him to obey the principal as well. When his sister wouldn't be around, the boy didn't like all this very much, for he didn't like such tenderness. But at that moment, an elderly woman called out to her. It was her mother. She told Vanessa that the carriage had arrived. The girl immediately came closer to her. Her mom was a little concerned, but also thrilled. She looked at her daughter and asked if she knew how lucky she was to get into that place in the first place. But the woman asked that she would by no means stop there. She wants Vanessa to succeed and forget about life in the orphanage. After that, the orphanage worker, whom Vanessa also called her mother, hugged the girl tightly. They stood like that for a while. Then she said goodbye to them all, wishing them all good luck. When the girl went to Putin, she wrote a letter to Mr. Benefactor. That's how she addressed him. But then she wrote that it sounded too formal. However, he is her benefactor, so she addresses him as respectfully as she can. The girl asked in the letter if he knew her name, but decided to write what her name was just in case. She also wondered if he had chosen a name at random from the A to Z list. She attributed her concern to the fact that before their sponsors had always chosen names that began with the first letter of the alphabet. She thought it would never be her turn until the end of her life, so he is her savior. Moreover, he imposed 2 conditions for admission to the Wanberg Academy, considered the finest on the continent. All he asked was that she send him a letter at least once a month and turn in her report card. She's perfectly capable of doing that. The girl also asked her benefactor if he would regret it. The girl also asked the benefactor if he would regret it, because when she was a child, she used to fill out her diary 3 times a day, and it would be easy for her to write to him more often. Vanessa also wrote that he will have to become her pen pal from now on after all, because those are very important connections. She also wrote that going to Wanberg Academy was the fulfillment of her most cherished dream, and she felt it was the path just right for her. But the moment she was on the road and night fell, and an owl flying by suddenly screeched something, she felt like a very lonely girl. Looking up at the dark night sky, Vanessa tried to control her heavy and agitated heart, but she was unable to do so. There were so many questions swirling around in her head. She didn't know if she could do it, or what would happen if she failed. What would she do when everyone started laughing at her? And all these thoughts made her heart very uneasy. But at the same time, she also had excitement, for she had entered the Wanberg Academy, the best on the continent, and would get a real education. For a long time, Vanessa could not sleep because of all these thoughts, but in the morning she managed. She was awakened by the coachman, who told her that they had already arrived at the airfield in Odessa. The girl couldn't get her bearings for a while and couldn't understand where she was at all. But when she opened her eyes, she saw all these big machines flying in the air and immediately understood everything. Vanessa stepped out of the old wagon with her suitcase and, watching all this activity, was downright amazed. She'd never seen ships flying through the sky before. It was downright unbelievable to her that something so huge and heavy could fly like a bird in the sky. Suddenly she reached into her pocket for something and fumbled for something strange. When Vanessa reached her hand out, she saw a candy bar. It was from the principal. She told the girl to eat it when she was hungry for it. For a while the girl was sad, for she did not know what lay ahead. But seeing such a small gesture from the principal, she was encouraged again. Vanessa reached her hand up and thought, that there was travel and adventure ahead of her. And with that fluttering heart, she set off on her interesting journey. I was fine with her for the first time, of course. Never mind the fatigue of the long trip, the excitement of the first trip. And importantly, the landlady of the hotel where she was staying before boarding the airship fed her so much food, deeming her too small and thin. There was so much food that the whole airship flight made the girl nauseous, and she emptied her stomach. In the letter, Vanessa also wrote that, although she was thin, she was very tall. As it seemed to the girl after an eternity, she finally refused in Visigoth, a small town that is not far from the academy. When she and the other students, who were also flying on this airship, disembarked from it, she saw many other students with the principal and various other teachers. At that moment, Vanessa had goosebumps running all over her body as she found everyone beside her. The realization finally hit her that she would be studying with them, and it was really true. In fact, when the girl lived in a small room shared by 8 people, the wind could be heard making the windows even shake, and the tree shadows that formed on the ceiling always frightened poor Vanessa. At such moments, she would look at the book she clutched in her hands and imagine that someday she would go to the Rosenberg Academy or the Bartow Academy. And instead of a sergeant in Odessa Rose, she of course envisioned becoming a completely different person. For example, the amazing Vanessa Rose, or the smartest Vanessa Rose ever. But in truth, she couldn't even imagine at times like this that she would enter Wanberg, the most famous academy on the continent that even the rich couldn't always get into. Most of the students who enter in the middle of the year start right from the second year, so the girl was very worried about it. When Vanessa first came to the head of the academy, she said she didn't have to worry, because she was placed in the 3rd year because of her exam results, and she had a lot to learn in the month before the semester started, so she could take it easy. The girl, of course, tried to calm down in this way, but it was when she finally arrived at Wanberg Academy that she was once again overcome with incredible excitement. Because of her intense nerves, Vanessa clenched her fingers tighter and tighter on the handle of the suitcase, afraid that sooner or later it would come off altogether. She stood looking at the academy for a while, but then a guy walked past her and grabbed her shoulder. She immediately jumped back, because she hadn't expected that. But the guy who hit her suddenly turned around and with an indignant face asked her why she was standing there, blocking everyone's way. No one could pass. In fact, Vanessa was so startled by the magnificent view of the academy that she froze in place and really didn't move anywhere. But at that very time, she suddenly heard someone's voice behind her. It was a cheerful, red-haired girl. She went up to her and asked her if she knew it was Vanessa Rose. Vanessa only nodded in response, for she did not realize who this person was. It was Alice Bolton. She introduced herself and said it was a pleasure to meet her. Alice Bolton was actually in her 5th year. She showed the girl around the academy, and even during vacations, Alice never goes home. Vanessa made a special effort to memorize every conversation they had, so she could write everything in detail to her benefactor later. And indeed, the girl remembered everything in great detail. Alice said that a lot of people go straight to the 3rd year, but politely asked how she had managed to do it. Vanessa lowered her head and said she didn't know herself. She applied for admission and took the exam, but was told she was enrolled right away. Alice, upon hearing this, said that maybe there was a reason for all this, since professors are never wrong. She also asked how old she was. The girl said 18. Then Alice thought for a while and said that she was 19, and she was also quite late in the program. But she shouldn't worry, because at one time, she too had been enrolled in the 2nd year in the middle of the program, and it had been quite difficult for her to adapt. Alice did not immediately say the reason. She stared at the distant mountains for a while and refrained from continuing the conversation. Vanessa still didn't understand what it was all about, but anyway, all the classes the girl showed her were really beautiful. They even went into the magic engineering class, where everything was flying and glowing brightly. After that, they entered the hall where swordsmanship lessons are held, and in this place, you can also learn the magic of fighting monsters. Alice and Vanessa were very surprised by this sight. Vanessa had actually seen many beautiful classrooms, and she liked that they were not like each other. but she was most impressed with the one classroom that was the last one they entered. This was the Academy's library. It was more beautiful than any other place the girl had ever seen. The space was so large and the number of books was unbelievable. Alice stood behind and, seeing the girl's delighted face, said that she might seem beautiful now. But when she would literally live in this place, every exam she would start to get sick of the place. Afterward, Alice took her to her dormitory, as she was frozen in place from being so impressed with this beautiful library. When they got to the dormitory, the girl showed her Vanessa's room. It was the last one on the 4th floor. In fact, when Vanessa saw this room, she could even say it was quite cozy. The chairs had ledges with golden tassels on them, and the quilt and bed felt like they were soaked in sunlight. The girl was actually a little uneasy. She had never had her own bed before, let alone a room. Alice distracted her after a while from her musings and, extending her fist to make a welcoming gesture, wished her luck. The girl smiled back at her and bumped her fist, thanking her for her luck. After a few minutes of hesitation, she finally lay down on the bed. It was so soft that tears came to Vanessa's eyes, for she had never been on such a soft bed before. In fact, for the first time in her life, she wouldn't say it was a day she was looking forward to, but it was definitely one of the best days of her life. The girl does not know at all what this benefactor looks like, but she thanked him again in the letter. At the end, she also wrote in surprise that she did not know how it happened that the letter she had originally written to express her gratitude had become so long. But she also said that the shelter director always told her that she often strayed from the topic of conversation and talked a lot. And yet she was right. This is a prime example for her. Vanessa looked at the stack of papers and realized that maybe the envelope was too thick so she could return it, and ended up only being able to buy one stamp. The wax girl made a special seal to close the envelope, and wrote at the end that she wished him good health and happiness, and was more grateful to him than to anyone else. Vanessa also wrote in the letter that if the letter was too long for him to let her know, and because next time she would try to write less if he didn't like it. Shortly thereafter, the man who was precisely her benefactor read the letter and pondered a response for some time. The man then began to write down his response to Vanessa Rose's letter as well. It had been quite a while since then, and Vanessa was already in full swing to class. The teacher wrote on the blackboard about magical creatures, and said that she hoped the students remembered what they had learned the previous day. The girl herself was very tired. After all, yesterday they had studied a lot, and her brain was no longer able to process the information. The teacher in turn said that in this lesson they would talk briefly about magical creatures. According to the National Dictionary definition, magical creatures include a variety of different kinds. Absolutely all creatures with magical elements, such as magical beasts and fairies, are collectively called magical creatures. However, many people may have a question about how to identify monsters among them that will be dangerous to humans. Vanessa pretended to listen intently and stay awake, but really hoped she wasn't being asked, since she didn't know much about the subject. But at that moment, the teacher turned to the girl and asked her why she was suddenly looking at her like that, and told her to try answering with her mouth instead of her eyes. Vanessa immediately became anxious, for she didn't know how to answer. She sighed heavily and said that what made them different was that they hurt people. The teacher smiled and said that this definition refers to the reasons for separation. So in many cases, it is either a monster or not, but there are many creatures that have been reclassified as monsters. Then she asked Miss Vanessa if she knew anything about the recent case of the creature being relegated to the monster category. The girl became uneasy, for she knew absolutely nothing, and had been sitting there like a very stupid person the whole time. A few more hours had passed since then, and the girl was finally able to move on to another room after class was over. A written test on these topics awaits her tomorrow, so Vanessa decided to spend the rest of her time doing her homework and preparing for that assignment. It's enough that she's labeled an orphan. I'd hate to add the fact that she's an idiot to that title. So Vanessa quickly pushed all those thoughts away from her and sat down to her textbooks. She tried to gather her thoughts so that she could learn all the information she needed, but at that moment the book became very much like a pillow to her. She took the pen anyway and was going to write something, but everything was blurred in front of her eyes. The girl realized that if things continued at this rate, she would just fall face first onto the table. And when that almost happened, she immediately woke up and jumped back. Vanessa was a little surprised that she was already starting to fall asleep, but she still hadn't faced this book yet. The girl was so engrossed in her musings that she didn't even notice a girl approaching her from behind. This stranger put her arm around her neck and asked her if she was correct that she was her roommate. Vanessa looked at the girl in surprise, but didn't have time to say a word, for she continued to hug her and said that there were 2 beds in the room. She asked if she hadn't noticed it until now. In fact, the girl was so surprised that she would have her own bed that she really didn't notice anything but it around her, and didn't even see that there was also a second desk. But the girl, smiling, said that in any case, she hoped Vanessa would stay in this place for a long time. This girl's name was Lena, and she was a 3rd-year walker. She held out her hand and said she was very glad to meet her. Lena also said that she was 17 years old, and from the Aurelia region. She asked the girl if she had been there before and if she had heard of Leo, her family. She also asked where she had lived before. Vanessa was a little confused and didn't answer anything. In fact, she knew she was in trouble, because she didn't know how this girl would react if she knew she came from an orphanage. Despite this, she still said that she is Vanessa Rose. She is 18 years old and she has no parents. So she just came to this place to study thanks to a sponsor from the orphanage. She decided that she wouldn't lie and the rest would be as it comes. Seeing the surprised face of her roommate, Vanessa said that if she was uncomfortable, she could easily change rooms. The girl didn't want to hide her origin, so she didn't do anything about it. Lena was actually silent for a while. After that, she said in a quiet voice that in that case, she must surely be very gifted. Vanessa, hearing this, was very surprised and didn't know how to react to it, for she had expected the girl to be angry, disgusted, and swearing. But her roommate asked if she even knew how much it cost to study at this place. It was the most expensive among the continent's academies, and it was the place they'd send a random kid to. But Vanessa, who had already changed into her pajamas and was sitting on her bed, said she didn't have any outstanding powers, so she didn't know any such thing. But the girl wondered if she might just have some hidden talents. After all, she said, the sponsor would never send just anyone. Then she asked if the girl had lived entirely in the orphanage, or if she had a godfather or godmother. Vanessa sighed heavily and would not answer these questions. Then Lena apologized, saying that she didn't know anything about it and was just curious. Then she realized that sounded rude too, so she said she didn't have to answer that at all. In fact, if the girl hadn't met her within the confines of the school, but for example in an orphanage, it would have definitely hit her for such questions. But she sighed heavily and said that she was an orphan and had grown up in an orphanage and had no relatives, neither distant nor near. After that, they sat in silence. Lena was embarrassed because she'd touched on such a sensitive subject, but Vanessa just kept silent. Then, to lighten the awkward atmosphere, Lena said that her previous roommate had dropped out because she couldn't keep up with the program and couldn't cope with the workload. When Vanessa heard this, she felt a little sad and thought that there must be a lot of similar students in this academy. Of course, these students are very smart and well off, and Vanessa doesn't know if she can even keep up with them. She thinks it will be too difficult for them to find common ground with her new neighbor, so she has to adapt. But Lena came closer to her and told her that she had been asked to pick up her parcel and mail from the first floor. She also apologized for not telling her earlier, but the person who had sent the letter was probably her sponsor. Vanessa, when she heard this, was very surprised. She couldn't believe these words for a few minutes, and then she cried out, asking if he had really answered her letter. Lena took the thing she had brought from the first floor and said that this belonged to her. She handed her a huge bottle and a gold envelope, which was from the sponsor. Vanessa just stared at it all for a while, and couldn't really believe that she wasn't dreaming. She was so nervous that she couldn't even open the letter. She was very curious as to what he had written to her in the letter, so she immediately opened it and began to read. There the man addressed her and told her that this was his first response. This is the first time he is contacting her through a letter, so he must first say that they are very pleased to meet her. The girl also read that, as she called him, he too would be called Mr. Benefactor. though he did not deserve such a high title. The man also wrote about how he knows she will study hard academically, especially if she applies for the secondary program. It will be very hard for her to keep up at first. However, this is the first time he has personally chosen a fellow, and he stopped in their village quite by chance while traveling on business. It was Miss Rose he was smitten with, so if she needed anything, he wanted her to be sure to let him know. He'll do his best to do what he can. So the man wrote that since she did not say in that letter what she would need, he sent her a knier. He also wrote that if she put her letter in this knier, it would be sent to him at once, so that she might not worry at all about stamps. He had no other conditions, so he hoped that she would learn a lot and would definitely tell him about it all. Vanessa, after reading the letter, directly hugged this knier, for it was a very nice gesture. At the end, he also wrote that he couldn't tell her how happy he would be to receive a thick envelope from her in return. When the girl read all this, she couldn't believe her happiness. She was very pleased. She continued to cuddle with the thing the man had given her. But then suddenly she was distracted from her musings by her neighbor. Lena turned to her and said that she had seen so many kniers, but this one stood out among them all. The others, he is incredibly handsome, and she finds him very comfortable. She also said it looked like a ceramic jug. They were very valuable on the eastern continent. Vanessa thanked her and asked if it was hard for her to bring the package. Her roommate said it was all nothing. After all, they were roommates, and she was sorry for what she had said before. Since then, the girls have made up and found common ground. They suggested that they stop apologizing all the time and just try to be friends. When they said that, they immediately laughed, and from then on, the tense atmosphere was gone, as if it had never existed. It was a while before they went to bed. Vanessa rolled around for a long time and couldn't fall asleep, so she turned to her roommate and asked if she was asleep. Lena always had trouble sleeping, so she replied that she was still awake and wondered what was wrong with her. The girl said she was very interested. She doesn't know for sure why she was enrolled, but she thinks it was because of her age. But she replied that it can't be. After all, even though they are in the same course, they are all of different ages. At the moment, they have people between 16 and 24 years old on their course. When she heard that, she calmed down a little. And Lena also said that there was no need to enroll her on that criterion alone. There was probably more to it than that. She said that there must be something special about her that got her into this academy after all, so she can rest assured. Vanessa thanked her heartily for her support and wished her new friend a good night. Lena smiled back at her and wished her sweet dreams too. After that, the two girls fell asleep almost immediately. Vanessa thought that there must be something special about her too, and that thought made her happy. A whole month had passed since that day, and the girl continued to write letters to her benefactor. On March 8th, she wrote about the warm wind blowing around her on that day, and how much she loved spring. She also said that she was doing well, and hoped that his days were passing peacefully, without adventure. Vanessa also wrote about how she was very busy learning new things every day, so she couldn't write to him earlier. She thinks that even the wind itself tells her that he doesn't resent it, but maybe that's just a guess. Anyway, her official classes finally started last week. She was so nervous that day that she couldn't even drink a glass of water because her stomach was so twisted. But she was very lucky to have a new friend by her side who, when she saw this, immediately began to support her. Lena turned to Vanessa and told her to lift her chin, straighten her back, and look straight up. It would definitely help her, because self-confidence is very important in this case. They went to class, and the girl also said that her parents told her this every day, because with proper posture comes elegance. In fact, at times like this, when her roommate cheers Vanessa up like this, she thinks that this girl is very kind and noble, and she is very lucky to be friends with her. In fact, that day Lena asked her to sit with her in class. However, the girl refused and decided to sit separately. It was a very big blow to her, but Vanessa realized that she didn't have to look after her forever. She wasn't a little kid. At times, the girl also seemed to understand why Alice had said that adapting to the academy would be easy enough. And all because she is so busy studying that she has no time to worry about anything at all. Every day, Vanessa is given more and more difficult assignments that she just can't cope with. In addition, these assignments leave her even less time to sleep. She doesn't have any special deadlines, so she tries to do everything right away and give it to the professor, and the teacher gives her another assignment, so she has absolutely no time to do anything. Then the girl asked in her letter what the benefactor is busy with these days. She also wrote that sometimes, when she is not busy with her homework, she introduces him. Vanessa finds the benefactor dressed in elegant suits, sitting at a sumptuous table. He reads the letter she sends him and smiles, fixing his gray hair and beard. She also wrote about how these thoughts made her feel a little better. This day she will again have to immerse herself in endless tasks, and that is how her day will end. But she really wants the benefactor who received this letter to always have a good life. At the end, the girl drew some small flowers to decorate this letter and put it in a special magical jar that would send this letter straight to the man. Vanessa was happily watching all of this. But then suddenly she heard her roommate's voice saying that it would be so much easier for her if she just gave up. Lena said the main subjects are understanding elemental magic, history of almost everything, and literature. She thinks she only died from those 3 subjects. But the girl really wonders how Vanessa is still enrolled in level 3 math, principles of magic, and even fundamentals of magical engineering. Lena, who was lying on her bed resting after a hard day of school, said she was just crazy. After all, she should have applied for a humanities program, such as music or foreign languages. Vanessa suddenly laughed and said that the music sure sounded great, and she would have signed up there with pleasure if she had met her a little earlier. However, when attending extra assignments, Professor Guido didn't assign much homework, so she fell for it. Her roommate told her that that was the whole point of Professor Guido's trickery. He's trying to find at least one more student with magical talent. Lena explained that most of them don't have it at all, meaning no talent at all, so he's in desperate search. Vanessa suddenly grabbed her head and said that she couldn't believe she had fallen for this trick. But probably because of the amount of homework, she wouldn't be going to bed again until 3 o'clock in the morning. Her roommate smiled and asked why she didn't just drop it all and go to bed like she did. Vanessa, who was on the verge of a nervous breakdown, suddenly started screaming, saying that she had already completed all her math assignments and could rest easy now, and that she still had many projects ahead of her. Lena smiled and said that's what happens when you're born into a family involved in commerce. She memorizes math formulas the first time, so she doesn't have to sit at her textbooks for hours. Vanessa ran at her, saying that she would punish her properly that day for all the words she had said. She was about to defend the girl, but she started screaming, saying that she was giving up, and asked Vanessa to stop doing that. They both started laughing loudly, and Vanessa continued to tickle her roommate. But then suddenly, they heard some strange sound behind them. The girls immediately turned around, and then they saw a small piece of paper flying straight at them. When Vanessa caught it, she saw that it was a candy. The girl was very surprised, because she did not understand where it came from. But at that very second, a lot more different candy spilled out of her desk. There was candy and gummy candy. They were all different colors and flavors. Lena got up from the bed and looked at all this, and was very surprised. She asked her friend if her sponsor had sent it. When Vanessa unwrapped one of the candies, the girl said that they were Alfinas. This candy is made by magicians. Eating it will make you feel a little better, and that's very nice. But she also said that these candies were very expensive. In fact, any product that has even a little bit of magic in it is incredibly expensive. But these are even more so because they are composed entirely of magical substances. The next day, Vanessa woke up in the morning and saw that she had received a reply from her benefactor. She immediately picked up the envelope and began to read it. The man wrote about how he couldn't help but laugh at the image she presented. He also said that unfortunately, he doesn't have a beard or gray hair. The benefactor also asked if he should grow a beard to meet her expectations. When Vanessa read this sentence, she laughed out loud, because she didn't expect him to really look different. The man also wrote that sometimes when he imagines the academy that Miss Rose described, he begins to miss the smell of herbs in his school days. An academy is a place where students learn many things before fitting in with different people. He also said that she shouldn't worry about money at all. The benefactor is very hopeful that she will be able to pursue whatever interests her. He is also pleased that Miss Rose is adjusting well to life at the academy, At the end, the man wrote, as always, that if she needed anything or had any difficulties, he wanted her to let him know. He also wrote that he hoped she could sleep well that day and finally get some rest. Vanessa, when she sat down again in the evening to do a lot of her homework, decided to eat a candy bar for courage, and then finally decided for herself. She was going to work very hard that day and be sure to fall asleep no later than 1 o'clock in the morning. Her neighbor had been asleep for a long time and was dreaming her beautiful dreams, and the girl still had a lot of tasks to do. When morning came, the girl immediately started to wake her roommate, but Lena turned her back on her and said she wanted to sleep for another 10 minutes. But when the girl looked at Vanessa, she couldn't sleep anymore. She was in a terrible state. Alina asked if the girl had been up all night. Vanessa really did look just disgusting. Her hair was disheveled and there were bruises under her eyes, but she said she couldn't stop for some reason. And Lena still had to wake up, and she thought it was just awful. But she herself hoped that vacation would come soon so that this girl could get some rest at least. Vanessa suddenly said goodbye to her roommate and said that she would go first. The girl was very surprised, not understanding why she was so early, even though it was the first class and she shouldn't come too early. However, Vanessa said goodbye to her and ran out into the hallway, telling her that if she wanted to sit in the front rows, she had to hurry. In fact, the class Vanessa is taking in the morning is an unusual course she's taking with Lena, and it's Fundamentals of Magical Engineering. This course was particularly notorious for its notoriety. When Vanessa had already arrived for class, the teacher began to scrutinize their homework. He praised one of the girls, saying that she was doing an excellent job. As always, that girl was Savati, who was sitting next to Vanessa. She in turn smiled and thanked the professor for the praise in a sweet voice. Vanessa, who caught a glimpse of her, didn't understand exactly whether the girl should be on this course, for she had heard somewhere that she was only 14 years old. But she thought about the fact that in science it was talent, not diligence, that mattered. The girl, sitting in class, began to write down formulas that she thought she wouldn't even be able to understand later. Vanessa peeked into her deskmate's notebook, and seeing even more complicated formulas there, said she was really amazing at what she did. The girl, when she heard that, immediately smiled, but didn't say anything back. Vanessa thought about the fact that her goal was to get a grade point average in her subjects, and her smile was even cute too. But then suddenly this small and seemingly innocent girl became very serious, and turning to Vanessa said that it would not be difficult to get an average grade, but first place might be almost impossible for her. But Vanessa didn't pay attention to all these attacks and said that she understands everything. After all, in other words, the first place belongs to her, but she really thinks her work is amazing. She looked straight at the girl, and the girl in turn said that it was very surprising, because usually people called her arrogant, and she was not like that at all. Vanessa, when she heard this, was really surprised, and she looked at the girl and asked why they thought that at all. Savati felt a little embarrassed by this question, and she did not answer it, but only blushed, for she thought it was already obvious. But Vanessa in turn asked if they don't usually say it's adorable when something like this happens, because she's a real genius and can figure out absolutely any formula very easily. She looked at the girl and said that at least she thought so. Chawati still couldn't understand why she was being so friendly to her. But then suddenly, Vanessa laughed and told her in a whisper that she thought it was their way of saying she was the best. Just out of jealousy, they couldn't do it any other way. The other guys who were sitting around them, hearing this, immediately felt awkward. You see, really, really jealous of this girl. The teacher continued to say something. Vanessa in turn told the girl that she would be happy with the average grade in the subject anyway. Savati is still amazing. She has no pity to give this first place. After all, it is well deserved. The teacher turned to Miss Vanessa and asked if she could tell him the value of one constant in the formula he had written on the board. The girl immediately returned to the topic of the lesson and said that she needed to think for a while. When Savati saw this, she couldn't hold back a slight chuckle. The teacher in turn said that they should have a good understanding of the relationship between the calculation formulas. So Vanessa began to listen attentively for the rest of the lesson and wrote down the formula he asked her to solve. But when the girl wrote it down, She still couldn't understand what she was talking about. Savati in turn suddenly looked up from her piece of paper and let out a slight cough for her attention. Vanessa immediately looked at her and asked if she could look at her formula, for the girl had missed some of the notes. Savati in turn corrected her glasses, which had suddenly begun to slip down her nose, and said that she had it all done wrong. She started pointing at her piece of paper and said that the equations are wrong there because one symbol is different. And because of all this, there are already many mistakes there. The lesson was already over, and the students started to disperse, and Savati said that she had decided completely wrong. Since the definition of invariables is different, she would get a completely different result if she made even the slightest mistake. After that, the girl also explained what their difference was, but seeing Vanessa's upset face, she asked if she understood anything at all. The girl was ready to bang her head against the wall, and said that she felt as if she had heard something forbidden, as if she was summoning Satan, because these words were too far from her. But Vanessa thanked her for her explanation anyway. She also introduced herself and extended her hand to introduce herself. Savati felt a little uncomfortable. She stared at her hand for a while, but she shook it and introduced herself, saying that she, too, was very happy to meet her. As Vanessa looked again at her new acquaintance, she thought about how she was really amazing. So also about the same age as the kids at the orphanage. But that's absolutely the greatest developmental difference of all. At this point, she even wondered if they were coping there without her, and if they even missed the girl at all. Vanessa suddenly took her new friend's hands in hers and said she was buying her a treat. She suggested that they have lunch together and consolidate their new acquaintance. Savati was a little surprised at first, but she agreed to it. So soon they came to the dining room and sat at the same table. Vanessa explained that this was her thanks for her excellent explanation of the lesson. Savati waved her head back and thanked her for everything, but Vanessa said it was fine and she didn't need to thank her. Vanessa thought to herself at that moment that she shouldn't thank her, because it wasn't even her money. In fact, she had a special gold coin, and she wondered how much money was inside it. This gold coin is called Vam Vandalu, and it depicts the special magician who founded Wanberg. This coin contains real money in the account, and the girl has no idea how much the benefactor could put there. Therefore, she does not throw them around much, but at the same time she can pay for such trifles. Then her new friend spoke again, and asked Vanessa what her next assignment was, and told her that she was about to have math. When Vanessa heard this, she was very surprised and asked why she hadn't seen her in class before, and why she, a sophomore, was taking a class for older people. Savati continued to eat her lunch and said she was going to jump into another course soon. In order to advance to a fourth, she needs to complete a third program as well, which is what she is doing now. Vanessa, after calculating it all in her mind, was very surprised and asked if she was really taking both her second and third year at the same time to jump even higher. However, the girl said not at all. If you understand the subject at a higher level, there is no need to attend the junior course. When Vanessa heard that, she said it meant she was taking math too, and still she didn't understand. Isn't it too hard for her because of that? Savati suddenly turned to her and said that she was, after all, studying immediately in her third year, and asked if it wasn't hard for her to bear it all. When she heard that, she put her head down and thought about how hard it was, but she said that she was glad that she now had a chance to study, and thanks to the sponsor, she could barely get into this place. That's why she shouldn't miss a second of the time in which she can study. Of course, Vanessa is physically exhausted from the whole situation, and she doesn't have the same fervor she used to have. But even if she is suddenly afraid for no reason, it's a place she wouldn't dare to go if it weren't for her benefactor. That was why Vanessa, smiling at her new friend, said that she even considered herself lucky, because she had a chance to study at such a prestigious academy after all. Savati was silent for a while, sipping her drink, and then said that she had heard the professors praising the girl. They said she was making good progress. They say that Vanessa works very hard, and because of that she gets brilliant results. In fact, many may wonder why shy Savati suddenly had lunch with Vanessa, who was very active and sociable, but everything was very simple. She just thought that the girl was a very interesting person. The academy was a small society, so rumors spread very quickly. Vanessa's entry to the third year was unusual. So many eyes were fixed on her, even if the girl did not notice it, drowning in her textbooks. Savati at every opportunity always looked at Vanessa and watched even her. After all, the girl was very curious about what talent she even had. Undoubtedly, Vanessa's beautiful and cute appearance also attracted many people. However, she did not notice it at all, and thought that no one wanted to have anything to do with her. Since she wasn't one to hide her past, it was revealed to everyone that Vanessa was the child of a ruined nobleman and grew up in an orphanage. Moreover, since her grades were average, people looked at Vanessa with even more bewilderment. They didn't understand how she got into the third year right away. But Savati knew how hard Vanessa studied in general. She was so focused on her lessons that she didn't even notice her in the classes together, or even pay attention to her highly esteemed last name when she met her. Savati realized that people like this girl were slowly, but surely and productively achieving the success they dreamed of. Vanessa suddenly asked the girl if she wanted to go to class with her, since they were on the way anyway. Chawati agreed to it. And she herself at this moment thought that Vanessa doesn't take shortcuts, and such people can't be compared to others who are stupid for not even trying to do anything. Soon after lunch was over, they went to the office together. They talked, learning more and more about each other, and Vanessa asked her new friend in surprise if her brother was really in the Ministry of Magic and Technology. Savati said, "That's right, she has almost no magical abilities, but her brother is completely different, and he is a very good wizard." Vanessa replied that she understood, and also asked the girl what her least favorite subject was. Savati hesitated, but then said that she was actually good at everything. But Professor Elliot's literature classes were hardly above average. But at that moment, Vanessa turned around, because someone called her, and she saw Lena in front of her, who looked at her indignantly, saying that she had promised her that she would sit next to her that day. Lena was very annoyed and wondered why this genius sophomore had such a hold on her all of a sudden. Savati was surprised by this reaction, and correcting her glasses, said that it was the first time she saw this girl next to Vanessa, so she wanted to ask the question, who was she anyway? But Lena put her arm around Vanessa and told the sophomore that this girl was her friend, and that she would definitely sit next to her that day. Vanessa was very surprised by this behavior, and turned to her roommate and asked her what about all her other friends. Lena retorted that she had already turned them down, because she couldn't pass up the chance to sit next to her favorite roommate. On March 15th, Vanessa wrote a new letter to her benefactor, informing him that she had made 2 new friends. After school, they all did their homework together in the library, and they were even scolded by the librarian. They were so comfortable with themselves that they didn't whisper even after the reprimand. Vanessa also wrote that it's been a month since she's been at the academy, and finally feels like she's truly accepted into their little family. She thanked her benefactor for all of this and expressed her incredible joy at having met him. Vanessa also mentioned the spring flowers that are slowly blooming and her delight in watching them. One day Lena got the highest score on a test, and they decided to celebrate in a luxurious place. In fact, Vanessa was expecting a simple trip to a cafe, but ended up in a luxurious establishment, which surprised her a lot. As soon as they got inside, the waiter brought the menus, and the girl pretended everything was fine. Vanessa thought that maybe it was a good value for money restaurant. Lena ordered the beef burgundy and cheese plate, and then asked what Vanessa wanted to choose. Vanessa hid behind the menu and ordered the soup of the day and orange juice. Lena was surprised and asked if she was sick if she was ordering soup on such a happy day. When Lena looked at her red face, she thought she was definitely sick. But Vanessa was embarrassed because she didn't know the names of the dishes on the menu. Lena took Vanessa's hand, not knowing what to do, and began to apply some techniques she had read. Vanessa thought how kind Lena was. And why couldn't she just tell the truth that she didn't know all those dishes and their ingredients? Vanessa wondered why she couldn't just admit her insecurities. Another unpleasant situation occurred in math class, the subject she hated the most. She wrote that she needed math to build magic contour circles and calculate range, but she lacked the skills. Vanessa complained that, other than reading books at night, she didn't know how to apply such formulas in the future. But Vanessa explained that she pretty much understood certain equations, and thought she might actually have some talent. At the time, the girl simply did not know that those problems were an absolute trifle, because it turns out to be very difficult to put these formulas into practice, and she is ashamed to fall behind everyone else in the class. However, she is afraid that her benefactor will be embarrassed by her decision to support her. At the end, Vanessa asked, "Is her letter too sad?" She didn't really have anyone to talk to about it, and she was sorry for what happened. The girl was ready to cry, but she pulled herself together. She wrote about how despite everything, that's the one good thing about her, is that the next day she gets up again and moves on. Vanessa also wrote about how she recently borrowed a book from the library called Different Dishes of the World, and she stays up every night studying cubic functions in order to catch up at least a little bit with the people in the class. She also said, thanks to the figure, that they will probably be friends very soon. She's incredibly depressed right now, but she's sure that things will get a little easier and better in time. The next day, Vanessa kept struggling with the magic circle and didn't understand where all the lights that looked like fireflies had gone. She didn't understand why she couldn't do anything all the time. As she sat in class, all the other students were also trying to do the assignment that the professor had given them, and Vanessa realized that they didn't really care that the kids weren't doing well, because a lot of students were having a hard time with this assignment. Then one of the teachers said that we could stop talking about the basics. It would be better to talk about the conditions for activating magic. Surprisingly, even students at prestigious academies like Wenberg don't know how to conjure their own magic even before graduation. That's why the professor said that there are many wizards who have done magic only once in their lives. Because in magic, both natural talents and a set formula are important. In the other case, activation will occur if certain conditions for the natural talent are present. The conditions can be divided into two main ones, which are important to know. In the most important about the very first are external conditions such as a situation, such as a sky with a rainbow, an August sun, and an action. For example, one should open one's arms. There are also internal conditions, such as the mindset of the person making magic. One student could only do magic using his sword. In fact, if it was a simple sword, it would be completely different. Only a sword made of Eldar steel could activate this magic. The teacher said most are quite interesting, and the conditions, everyone's conditions are different. However, the student realized his way later, even before he trained hard with the sword, and was strong even without magic. So she asks that students not exalt magic and make it their top priority in life. And even if one day the magic powers run out, the children should not turn into nothing and a void. So she wants them not to dwell only on the very existence of magic, but to develop in other spheres as well. Vanessa was already returning home late at night. In fact, she thought about the fact that being a decent human being, whether one had magical powers or not, was quite realistic. It might be a lot harder than just mastering that very magic, but becoming a valuable person is just fine. However, still, no matter how Vanessa convinced herself, she really wanted to feel that power of magic again. She was also worried that if she was too greedy, she would become a person without magic or any human values. When she found on the way to her dormitory, she was suddenly very surprised, for the lights that had been glowing in the darkness and lighting her way suddenly began to shine very brightly. They were so warm and soft that they tickled her fingertips. At that moment, she even remembered how she'd felt those lights back at the orphanage, when she'd been hanging laundry in the dark all the time. Soon after, Vanessa finally arrived at the dormitory, but then suddenly the commandant met her and immediately addressed her. The girl was very nervous about it and laughed nervously and apologized, saying that she was only a little late because she had been delayed. Vanessa realized she was in big trouble, and she couldn't even believe she had run into the commandant. The woman in turn began to put the boxes aside and said it was true, but this time she forgave her. She handed her a package someone had sent to Vanessa, and told her that next time she wouldn't even look at it if she was even a minute late. So advised the girl to be more careful with her time. When Vanessa went up to her room, she changed into her pajamas and sat on the bed with Lena. The girl asked in surprise if she had really received the package directly from the commandant's hands, and also wondered who the sender was. The girl was not sure and wanted to suggest her own version. But when she opened the package, she saw familiar handwriting. It was a package from a benefactor, and Vanessa was very surprised by it. Lena looked inside and saw the beautiful ballroom shoes and said they were incredibly beautiful. And now her. It was as if these shoes were made for Vanessa and they would fit her perfectly. She asked that the girl hurry up and be sure to try them on, but Vanessa in turn began to read the letter, and tears suddenly came to her eyes. It was written there that some say that good shoes lead their owners to good places. The benefactor hopes that tomorrow will be a day filled with happy events. The girl was so moved that she started to roar, and said it was an incredibly kind letter from her benefactors, and she was so happy to receive it. Lena suddenly laughed and said she was a fool. She advised her not to cry but to try on her beautiful new shoes. After the incident, the girl immediately wrote a reply to the benefactor. She said that, as he probably knows, she had no one at the shelter to receive such parcels from, and she'd only gotten them twice since she'd been born, and they'd all been from him. First it was the Hanir, and now it's these beautiful shoes. So Vanessa still can't believe this is actually happening to her. She was so grateful not only for the gift, but also for his kind heart, his concern for her feelings, his warm wishes. So she also wished him happiness from the bottom of her heart. The girl also inserted a small drawing at the end and signed it as Vanessa, excited about her new shoes. A few days later, Vanessa woke up in the morning to find that a reply from her benefactor was already waiting for her. Without thinking long, she immediately began to read it. In the letter it was written that he would be very grateful to the girl if she thought of him as a diary, which simply responds to her notes and happy and sad moments of life. It is quite normal. It's not that Miss Rose lacks anything, it's just that there's a lot she hasn't encountered yet. And if there's something she doesn't know, she should just study it and then there won't be any problems. The benefactor also wrote that it would probably upset him if his beneficiary didn't make any effort. But she stays up at night and studies harder than anyone else. So that's certainly not going to happen. He believes with all his heart that she will definitely succeed. The man also wrote that it was important to try, but he wanted her not to do it all at the cost of her own health. Vanessa read the letter and thought that her mentor was incredibly kind and cared about her. The benefactor also wrote at the end of the letter that she should enroll in drawing while she was at the academy, because her drawing was very different from what he remembered her as. He also asked what she thought about the humanities in general. Vanessa, when she read all this, was very surprised. She couldn't believe that her drawing was so bad that her benefactor had advised her to apply for a course. But then she realized she knew absolutely nothing about this benefactor. Yeah, he doesn't know anything about her either. They remain a mystery to each other, and Vanessa thinks it's unfair. Lena, who had already gathered in class, asked that Vanessa stop swearing at the letter already, because they had to go now or they would be late. After that, they went to the literature classroom, which had such an atmosphere that the space seemed to be filled with emotions. The warm air and fragrant tea made this class cozy. However, Professor Elliot, who leads the course, he was a sensitive man who fit perfectly into this space. The man poured tea for the girls who had come to his class, and turning to Miss Vanessa, said they needed to discuss her homework. The girl was immediately alarmed when she heard this, but she didn't know what was wrong, because she didn't even remember what she had written in this literature assignment. She remembered how tired she was while doing it, and nothing else. Professor Elliot told the whole class that Vanessa Rose is the coldest student he's ever met. She also has the most determined heart of anyone. When the girl heard this, she immediately realized that she had messed up big time. The professor kept talking and said that her cold heart was no different from Maloran's 4 great tragedies. The man wondered how she could write such a review for such a beautiful story. She wrote about her eldest son being an idiot, because this is the harshest criticism he has ever seen, and he is incredibly outraged by it. Lena, who was sitting next to the girl, suddenly started laughing. Vanessa was very angry, because she had said that she thought the same way. But now it turned out that she was the biggest traitor. The professor asked, "Does she really think this character has the wind in her head?" Vanessa thought at that moment that she should have written that in completely different words. The professor said that love was not something that could be expressed so easily, but the girl was very surprised, not understanding what was wrong with her description of love, because everything was clear there. After this incident, Vanessa immediately wrote a letter to her benefactor, saying that it was incredibly difficult with Professor Elliot. She was incredibly uncomfortable in class that day, because she wrote that the oldest son in a three-brother family was a downer. But she doesn't realize what she did wrong, because she really thought Dylan Daiko was very stupid. He fell in love and ruined his parents' family, betrayed and couldn't even do his job properly, and she didn't understand how Anna could even like such a man. If it were her, Vanessa would have kicked him right back when he came back after leaving his parents alone. Vanessa wrote about how she criticized the story a bit, because she doesn't think it's anything great. But she certainly doesn't think it's insensitive. Of course, the girl herself agrees with a lot of things, because the words matter. On Daiko, like jewelry, he says such phrases about love that it seems that it can save absolutely everything in the world, but she does not know whether love is really so strong and beautiful feeling. Vanessa didn't know what would happen if they pulled their hands towards someone who would just let them go at the end. Then she wrote about how, with only writing about it, and then she already felt really pessimistic. She also told the benefactor that she was sorry, because she was wrong about the literature class, and she was madly sorry that it was a common subject. Vanessa certainly agrees that studying these beautiful poems will help her a lot in her life, for the day may come when she will confess her love to someone. Lena, who was sitting next to her reading this letter, suddenly laughed. Vanessa asked her to stop doing that, because it was serious. She continued writing, saying that according to her benefactor's information, Lena couldn't stop laughing while the professor was tragically reading out her assignment, and she thought it was too much. But anyway, through this assignment, she learned a lot. First, that you have to hide some of your feelings when writing things like this. Therefore, she is going to get the highest score for the next literature assignment. Vanessa also asked at the end of the letter whether the benefactor likes classical literature, and if so, she will try to like it too. Benefactor, when he received this letter, immediately began to read it, and smiled all the time when he got to her reflection. When the letter was read, he immediately picked up a piece of paper and began to write her a reply. The man wrote there that he found it very hard not to laugh at the letter, for it reminded him of his past when he was in the academy, and thought the same thing, when he read the three brothers of the Dyke family. But now, when he looks at her reply, he thinks that he must have written his criticism to the professor in a more veiled and precise way. Her essay will surely be a masterpiece that will be talked about for a long time to come. Vanessa, when she read these words, she was very pleased, because even her mentor said such a thing. He also wrote about three brothers from the House of Dyke being a very famous classic about love, and when he was very young, he once said that such novels should be burned instead of firewood, for they are utterly useless and stupid. The girl who was lying on the bed reading this letter was in complete agreement with him. The benefactor, on the other hand, thought that there was still something in these novels that he did not understand. His thoughts have not changed much since that time, for he cannot give Miss Rose advice on the subject. He will put down a copy of a letter that his family once wrote. One of his relatives wrote about the fact that perhaps if a benefactor experiences true love, they can understand Anna and Dylan Dyke. An experience that will change the whole you to the core is very rare. And they hope he remembers the letter and reads it again, and then just smile and realize that they were indeed right. And the older the benefactor became, the more he realized the necessity of reading classical literature. Thanks to it, they can see the great people of different eras through the eyes of these very fictional heroes. And it's incredible. It's great to be able to experience a life that you've never lived and can never live. Vanessa, when I read that, I thought it was a very good idea and the right thing to do. The benefactor also hopes that Miss Rose will take something out of this letter, as he did himself. One day. Besides, he had also heard that Professor Elliot was quite fair. Therefore, he believes that the girl should not worry, because she will be given a fair grade depending on the effort she puts in, even if her opinion differs from his own. When Vanessa finished reading this letter, she put the paper to her chest and started hugging it. She didn't really know anything about her mentor and felt a bit detached, and it was very surprising that after reading this book, their thoughts suddenly coincided. Vanessa also thought about the fact that if she changed her mind one day about this non-Dyke case, she would be sure to tell her mentor about it. However, She was still worried about what the grades for the other assignments she had done would turn out to be. With these thoughts, the girl plunged into her dream world, where she could no longer worry about such mundane problems. A whole week had passed since then, and Vanessa received a letter from her benefactor, who, addressing her, said that it had not yet been a month, but that it was very strange that the hanir was empty. He is very worried, because it is the first time he has not heard from her for so long. Certainly the man knew that such an opportunity because of the number of assignments, and she shouldn't take it as if he was pressuring her and wanting her to write. The benefactor also sent her some toffees and gummy candies. He really hoped she would like them. At the end, he just signed that the letter was from him,